have a whole new discussion on thoughts, and that is about cognitive distortions. And we have an expert here who is trained in this stuff, and we're going to have fun sharing with you a little bit about how these things can affect our thought processes. So, Evonna, tell us about cognitive distortions.
Well, first of all, your perception is your reality. And so we all have a different reality because we all have a different perception. One of the things we talk about in counseling a lot are different thought filters or cognitive distortions. And so today we're going to break it down into 10 different cognitive distortions, and which are really just basically tendencies or patterns of thinking or believing. So I don't know about you guys, but I've had some skewed thinking. We talked about taking our thoughts captive last week, but sometimes the way we filter our thoughts or filter what other people say through our thoughts really messes with us.
Yes.
And so we want to help you start to understand the differences, because cognitive distortions or thought filters, they're really filtering your beliefs and causing them to be inaccurate or even false at times.
And that can mess with your thinking, with your relationships, with your memories of the past, with all kinds of stuff. At least in my life it has. How about you, Ginny?
Absolutely. And it causes friction in relationships. For me, there are times when I will only hear one part of what someone said, and then I can't even hear the rest of it because it's warped and it's magnified, and then everything else gets kind of shut down. And that happens in different ways through all of these different thought filters that we're going to be talking about. It's just what gets magnified and what doesn't get magnified, and what gets filtered out completely. And so I think for me it was really helpful to understand that these can actually be harmful, not just to my relationships, but also to me personally, where it's spirit, soul, and body, where all of those things are affected by the lens through which I see the world.
Yeah, and I think there's a scripture, Paula, that might go along with some of this.
Yeah, well, we're talking about, for as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. And you can look it up in your own translation when it goes to Proverbs 23:7, the beginning of that. But there's so many places where, for me, realizing how those distortions were coloring my whole world, my universe, was, and I didn't know they had all these like clinical names and terms and stuff where for me it was just like, oh, you mean that's not the truth? That's not normal? Like wearing a heavy dark pair of sunglasses and thinking the whole world is almost black because that's what I see. And then as I started learning and changing and taking off these filters, the world would become all red or the world would be all green. And I kept thinking that was real. That's just how the world is. Right. And then when I found out it wasn't, and it was like, oh wow, over time I've gotten to see the world more and more with all these different colors and with much more reality than I ever had.
Yeah, so the first one we're going to talk about, the first distortion, is all or nothing. Sometimes we refer to it as black and white thinking. That was one that I struggled with very intensely, I guess is the word there, especially in treatment. And so when I went to treatment for my eating disorder, my therapist had me make a bracelet that had the word gray on it to help me start thinking in a gray way, because it was I couldn't see any gray. It was either this way or this way, and there was no in between at all. Right. So it's that extreme. And so a lot of people that struggle with perfectionism struggle with that as well.
Right, because it either is perfect or it was all wrong.
Right.
Yes.
It's either an absolute success or it was a complete failure.
Right.
There's no in between. And so if I didn't make an A+, I had failed.
Right.
That was part of that extreme thinking. Jenny, what about you?
Well, for me, when I was looking at other people, if I was looking at Evonna and seeing her performance, I'd be able to judge her just fine and say, oh, she's got all this gray area. But it was when I was looking at me and I'd say, oh yeah, I've got gray area too, until I did something wrong or until someone pointed something out. And then all of a sudden it was, I am wrong. Everything about this is wrong. This is all wrong. And it would just be, my emotions would go off the chart. But in between those times, I would have told you, oh no, I don't have that. But when it really came down to it and I had to experience it, that's when it was that jolt of adrenaline that came in this idea of I'm totally wrong. And all of those negative thoughts about myself would just like pour in and that's when I knew, okay, that's when I got to decide that that's a thought filter, and I need to look at this. And I would actually have my counselor would have me make a continuum, and I would write it down and say, okay, so if failure's over here and success is over here, where are you on this scale? And I had to see it visually because I am such a visual person to say, oh, I'm right there instead of all the way on the failure side. So that was helpful for me.
And one of the things that I noticed in my process is that I said the words always or never a lot.
Yes.
That's very black and white. That's not, never and always are not in between words. So, you know, especially when it came to like counting calories, like I have to eat this amount, or I will never lose weight, or I'll always gain weight. Number 2 is overgeneralization.
Yeah, and that piggybacks right on the last one we just did, all or nothing thinking, because we tend to overgeneralize those extremes. So then it's everyone always does, or nobody ever does. And I was good at layering these. So these first two would be that way for me. Nobody's ever done anything nice for me. Very definitely not true. But when I thought it, that was all I could see in that time frame. Or people are always mean to me, which again, very definitely not true. But when I read the world and saw things through that, then how was I not going to be depressed? If no one was ever nice to me and everybody was mean to me, I mean, my world was bad.
Yes.
Except that wasn't reality.
Right.
There were people mean and people who were nice and the in-between, and I just needed to reset my gauge. It was like my gauge was just broken, and I was judging everything off a broken gauge. I don't know.
Well, we tend to, when we overgeneralize, we base it off of a single event. So my mom yelled at me. My mom always yells at me. Instead of saying, no, in that moment she might have yelled at me, but she doesn't always yell. Yeah, and if anybody has ever felt triggered before, then they will understand these thought distortions or cognitive distortions a whole lot. Because that's, when we're triggered, that we filter everything through a thought filter of some sort. So thought filter number 3 is catastrophizing. I was a queen of catastrophizing. I also had a bracelet that said that in treatment. Because I made, like, it was always the worst case scenario. Like, my therapist showing up late for a session is, oh my gosh, you know, I'm never going to have therapy, or, which I'm, you know, then including overgeneralization and black and white, but it's that huge catastrophizing, like, it's awful. It's the worst case scenario.
Right. So like I'm late in traffic, stuck in traffic right then. It's not only am I not going to get there on time, but now they're going to hate me and the deal isn't going to go through, and then I won't be able to feed my children. I'm going to get fired. It's going to be, and it's just this whole scenario when it's just a delay in traffic. So those kinds of things where I would catch myself realizing that I took one little issue or problem or whatever, and I could extrapolate it out or just pin it all out into the future that the end of the world was going to come, and it was just all, it was all going to be the absolute worst. You know, my kid doesn't answer the phone, and that means they've died in a car accident, and now I got to plan a funeral. I know I'm laughing, but seriously, like this isn't joking. This is the way those thought processes go, where I'm learning to stop. Wait, stop. What is the actual fact right now? The fact is the traffic is backed up. That could change in the next 2 minutes. Or they didn't answer the phone this time, maybe they had it on vibrate, whatever it is, but realizing that there's other explanations.
And it seems silly when you're not triggered, and we were talking about this, like, really, Paula, you would think that your kids are dead or something just because they're not answering the phone. But that's what it's all about. It's about blowing things out of proportion.
Yes. I don't need to be triggered to go to that one with the phone if someone doesn't pick up the phone or if I can't reach them. And some of that I think is just because we're so used to having that immediate response that, and maybe even into a little overgeneralization, because I did have a friend of mine growing up who didn't answer the phone, and I was surprised, and I thought, I didn't think they were having anything. Oh, it turned out they broke their arm and had to go to the hospital. And so there was this nagging idea of, it happened once, so it could happen again. And I go straight to something terrible, awful has happened. And oh no, how do I get a hold of them? Who do I call instead? And I have to stop myself and breathe and say, God, I trust you. I trust that you are taking care of them. And it's not my job to figure all of that out. I don't want to miss right now.
And it could be that their phone is just on vibrate and they
know.
couldn't hear it. Because I never have mine not on vibrate, so I don't know what it even sounds like if it rings.
Right.
So the fourth one we're going to talk about is mental filtering. Ooh, that's that tendency to focus on the negative.
And we call that pessimistic sometimes, where somebody has a mental filter, and I can go, well, I'm not really pessimistic. I don't see everything as bad. I mean, I look at the roses and stop and smell the roses. But when it comes to anything that raises a question, is my automatic go-to the negative scenario? Is it the negative viewpoint? Is it, oh, they looked at me funny, so therefore they don't like me? Or maybe they looked at me funny because they were looking behind me at somebody else and they weren't even looking at me. There's so many of those places where when the go-to is automatically negative, it's seeing only that little piece of the puzzle.
When I teach on this, I've done that in the past, but I've called it pain perspective. And I think that the enemy does this really well, where he just wants me to focus on that pain, and it's like we're looking through just one little like kaleidoscope kind of thing, and that's it. Like you said, it's very much zoomed in, and I have to think about, okay, what's the bigger picture here? Like what is it really? Because I would have a tendency to just make mental lists of all of the negative things and then repeat them and tell people what those lists were and repeat them to, more than one person. So I knew everything that was wrong. And I don't know, somehow I felt like that was making me more, effective in life. Like that was even, I had been seduced into thinking this is what I needed. I needed to have these lists of all of these negative things. Thank goodness. I don't feel that way anymore.
Yes.
Yay, God, for truth.
Well, and when we're looking through the kaleidoscope or the binoculars, we aren't able to see any of the evidence that proves otherwise.
Right.
Which makes it where we go more towards, like Paula was saying, the negative versus the positive. All right, so number 5, jumping to conclusions. Sometimes it's also called mind reading or fortune telling. Anybody know anything about that?
Wow, and I don't think you're talking about like a fortune teller that I go pay money to tell my fortune. No, it's more like, oh, I saw the way you looked at me, and now I know that you're mad at me because I must have done something wrong, and you're never going to be my friend again. And but that's how it was for me, and it was based on a look, and then I'd find out later the look was based on the text message they got that their cousin just died. Wait a second, it had nothing to do with me. And I'm sitting here building this entire scenario about how you're going to hate me and never be my friend again when it wasn't about me at all. And so one of the ways I've tried to change this one is realize that so much of what's going on around me is not about me. And to give people grace and the benefit of the doubt and not assume a negative or a breach in relationship for me, but to assume that it's not related to me and to assume a connection in relationship. And I'd rather have you prove me wrong, that you really are mad at me and that you don't want to talk to me, than for me to build that up and make it as if it were when it wasn't, because then I'm the one breaking up the relationship.
Well, and that kind of is what number 6 does too. It's that personalization. So when we begin to personalize and take everything personal,
You don't do that, Ginny, I'm sure, right?
Not as much as I used to. I mean, I fight it. There's You know, we're going to be talking about victim mentality in the coming weeks in Unit 3, and that's a huge part of this, was I took everything personally. If my roommates didn't take out the trash, I took it personally. Maybe they were busy, Ginny. It wasn't that they wanted to saddle you with more responsibility. It was that maybe they have something going on in their life. And some of that, again, is jumping to conclusions. And it all works hand in hand. Now the enemy likes to, you know, put these thought filters on us and these assumptions that we like to make. But I had all of that going on where, they must hate me, and so they didn't take out the trash. And so here I am jumping to conclusions and catastrophizing and personalizing. And all because I had to take out the trash. That's great, Ginny.
And then taking on the blame.
Right.
Because then I, as a victim, I automatically thought everything was my fault. But you then make it a way of thinking like that, and it's any and everything around me that happens, or that the looks, or the whatever the pieces are, the person's late, or it's my fault. My whole family's issues, if there was anything wrong anywhere, it was my fault. What did I do wrong? Why didn't I make them do the right thing? Why didn't? And I'm like, wait a second. Again, the healing perspective is it's not necessarily about me at all. Mm-hmm. It may not be my fault, my problem, a problem with me. It just may not be any of that. And learning to start seeing it outside of that was hugely helpful.
Well, and then we start shitting and musting on ourselves, which is number 7. And I always have to be very careful when I say that to a client. Don't should on yourself. Like
SHOULD.
Yes. Or don't must on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's placing these expectations on ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's the other thing about expectations is here's your expectations, and here is reality, and everything in between is misery.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like
That's
you're
a good
miserable there. Like you just can't stay there.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's part of why you're here, and you're doing these lessons with us each week is so that you don't have to stay there, because there is hope and there is healing. Because even though each one of these that we've already talked about, each one of us continues to fight it and sometimes struggle through it, but it's not anywhere it used to be.
Thank God.
Which is amazing. And we've talked about the I should have done, I should have said, I should have been, I should have gotten more done, I should have been a better mom to my kids, I should have, whatever it is. And the counter to that for me was giving grace. You know, other people may think I should have, or I might just have unrealistic expectations, or God might have a different plan than I did. But at the end of the day, it's going back to grace. Where can I give myself grace for being me, being human, for God being the one in control of my life and not me, for other people's needs and things. There's so many places where when I hear should, ought, must, those words in my head, then I stop and say, wait a second, I need to give grace. Whether it's myself, or I think you should have done this, or whatever, is back to giving grace.
Yeah.
With expectations, and very similar to what you were saying, how I was taught with expectations is the higher your expectations, the further you have to fall. The more disappointed you're going to be. That's going to hurt even more. So if you want to keep your expectations, realistic, you're not going to have too far to go emotionally, and and you can keep them realistic. I can remember thinking, I have to wash the floors of my house before people come over. Like, I have to. This was a must. It was ridiculous. But this is what my mother did before she had family over, was she would wash the floors and make sure that the floors were vacuumed. And so I just assumed that this was a must, and she just wanted to do it. It was nice. It was how she knew, I have to clean the floors now, and it's done on a regular basis. But for me, I took that on as I have to do this. And so I really was hard and shaming on myself if I didn't wash the floors, until I finally told someone, and they said, yeah, it's okay, Ginny, we're not looking at your floors. Like, that's really the last thing we're looking at. And besides, when we leave, it's probably going to be dirtier anyway, and you're going to have to wash it again. So don't worry about it. And all of a sudden, that's when I came out of this isn't something, sometimes it's because our family has done this, or we've seen it modeled for us, and we think that this is an absolute, a black and white thinking, kind of ties in as well with that. And the gray area. Sometimes we need a little bit of perspective from the outside.
Yeah.
Kind of like sorting the laundry and having to have it color coded by reds, and blues and greens could go together, but whites had to be only white and blacks had to be only black, and jeans, they definitely have to be separate because they're different texture and type. And I couldn't do laundry till there was enough laundry to make like 7 different loads, because otherwise, and then you run out of clothes before you have the right number of loads and the right colors, and it gets really ridiculous. But that was how my mom sorted laundry when there were 8 of us in the family. So you go 2 days and there's enough laundry to do all of those colors, and it was a way that it made her happy to sort it out. But in my head, it was, I can't do the laundry until I have it done and have it this way. So even my 9-year-old, when he was like 3 and 4, knew how to sort the laundry down to the exact colors. I think they learned their colors that way. But learning the other side of it, where it's there's flexibility, there's grace, there's a whole lot of different ways to do things, and it isn't always a concrete, law that goes on you in areas.
You mean I don't have to get all the dishes out of the sink before I go to bed?
Right, like you can't sleep. Good dreams do not come if there's dishes.
Dirty dishes, because then I'm dreaming about the dirty dishes. No, not really, not anymore. Oh man. Number 8 is emotional reasoning, which is the cognitive process by which we conclude that our emotional reaction has to be true. Because I'm feeling it, it must be true.
So the facts don't matter?
No.
Like
my emotions are what matters, and that's what I'm feeling right now, and that's what's true.
So even if somebody else says, but that wasn't the truth, it was this other thing, like the fact that I was freaked out of my mind, afraid, thinking that a tornado was going to hit us because I was looking at my phone's weather thing from 3 hours ago. But I was afraid, so it has to be real.
It is, right? That sounds a little crazy.
Well, it feels right inside. I mean,
Right.
And we, talking about you are not your emotions, and you don't need to let them lead you around by the nose, and we don't have to go down all of those rabbit holes and spiral out. It's the idea that our emotions are not actually truth all the time, and so I know for me, just feeling like, oh my gosh, I feel left out, so therefore everyone hates me, kind of thing. Sometimes that would come in where it's, I don't belong here. Take it to overgeneralization. I don't belong anywhere. There's no, and that was my experience going to college, especially where there's a whole new group of people. All of my friends were somewhere else, other schools, and I was trying to fit in. So, but then it's, I feel left out. So then I am left out, and I am alone, and so no one cares about me, and all of that. And instead, I could have actually looked around and said, oh, there's someone that literally told me they love me. And even though I can't absorb it emotionally in the moment, I can be aware that there's something beyond my emotions that is truth.
And sometimes I learned, because my emotions could be so distorted because of panic attacks and triggers and all kinds of stuff. I actually had some people that I could trust and take to them, what did you see in this situation? Trying to get a balance to the emotional overload I was experiencing in that moment. And they were able to many times bring in factual things that I had to choose. Am I gonna stay locked into my emotional perspective, or am I going to actually bring in truth and facts and have a better picture of it? But where I couldn't see past the overwhelming emotions I was dealing with, it was really helpful for me to have other people that can do that. And you girls know that. Sometimes I ask you, so tell me what you think about this, because I'm having a lot of intense emotions tied to this, and I want to have a better, more rounded perspective with more truth and fact mixed in there.
Yes. And then we have number 9, always being right. I mean, I'm never wrong, so.
Never had this problem, right?
No.
Right, no, because I'm always right. There is no issue. I don't even know why we put this on here. But it's that perception of always have to be accurate, always having to have the right answer. For me, it was, if I can't have the right answer, then I'm not going to answer.
You can't talk.
I can't talk. And in college and in school, that's very difficult.
But that's how you're always right.
Because I always have the right answer.
Yes,
Because otherwise I don't talk.
But that one, too, it's when you don't even listen when somebody else is questioning or bringing you other information. You've got to battle it out to the bloody end. You've got to prove it and keep fighting it and keep attacking, because if you're wrong, then that means you're worthless. That means that you're a failure. That means all these things, which again, back to the catastrophizing and the overgeneralization, and we go down
Black and white thinking.
black
Yeah,
and
all
white
of it.
thinking, where these things are what push you. And I remember in our family, we have a bunch of intelligent people, and we would have drag out debates on things you can't prove right or wrong.
Right.
It's a matter of perspective or opinion. And boy, we could keep it going and going for days and trying to pull in facts and figures from everywhere, when it's stuff that's about perspective and not actually a factual thing. So there never was going to be a right or a wrong person.
Right.
It was just two different viewpoints. And realizing that, wait a second, my need to have to be right and that I don't feel safe if I'm not proven right, or that they don't come to my side of this disagreement or whatever, realizing that was hard.
Yeah.
And now every once in a while, I'm actually wrong sometimes.
Proud of you.
Well, then we have number 10, which is magnification or minimization, which is the tendency we look at the positive in everybody else, but we minimize ourselves. And again, that kind of goes in with all of the other ones that we've been talking about. And we make light of this here because we are in constant work so that you can continue to grow and change and heal, because nobody wants to stay stuck in these thought filters.
No, life is so much better with balance and with truth and with facts and with reality. Even when reality seems hard, it still gets so much better when we have much more of a balance than these cognitive distortions or thought filters. And I love the fact that between the three of us, we spend time calling each other out on them. We spend time encouraging each other and doing that, which is awesome.
And having these is amazing, because now I can actually say, oh, I know what that is, and I can change my thinking intentionally in that moment. And I think that will absolutely help you to do the same as well. So good luck on this homework. Continue to take your thoughts captive, and have a great and a blessed week.